but it says recording now, and I'm hopeful that I'm doing it correctly.
I will try to start being on my best behavior now that I know the camera's on.
Does it tell? It should tell you it's recording,
Yeah,
right?
no, it says recording. That's why
Okay.
I've sat up a little straighter.
I see no difference, but if you say so, then
Wow.
okay. No, I know. You were just like, I sat up straighter, and then you
No, I
went.
didn't. I actually didn't sit
like,
up straighter until I said I sat up straighter, because then I realized I was supposed to. It's not important. Never mind.
It's not important. What I had already said didn't matter. Like, okay, thanks.
Yeah, that's the story of my life.
Well, I mean, I was gonna ask you about yourself, but if that is the story, I guess we could move past that question and just move on to
No, I want to hear your interview skills from the start, okay?
Oh.
I want to hear it. I want to know Jerome the interviewer. So please.
Okay, can you give me like the little like news jingle like that?
That sounded a little more like video game, but okay.
Good evening, everyone. We're here live with James Mello, who is coming to us live from an undisclosed location. We're not going to get into that, but we're excited to be talking with him. James, how are you doing on this fine evening?
Well, there's a hurricane blowing in, but it's about 800 miles south of me, so I think I'll be okay.
All right.
We'll see. I'm going to report back to you every 5 minutes to give you an update, but currently it is sunny and 76 degrees. Feeling pretty good.
Is it really sunny and 76 in Berrien?
I'm not in Berrien.
In South Bay?
Yeah, South.
Okay. Well,
yeah,
still,
it's really nice. It's perfect weather right now.
Probably the first time since I left that place that I found myself saying, man, I wish I was there right now, because for us recently, it's been all smoke and haze and burning hot sun and literal burning hot fire over here.
Well, thanks for not wishing you were here for my companionship over this entire summer. I'm glad the weather is what makes you wish you were here.
I'm glad you're glad.
Yeah.
Because I'm being serious.
Yeah. Well, gotta go. So
okay, thank you all for watching.
Yeah.
Have you had the chance to like go out and do stuff? I know if it's nice over there's a lot of things you could do. And I know with COVID, you sound like you can go to the mall and stuff, right? Like, have you had the chance to go out and enjoy some downtime recently, or you've been a busy man?
The last couple of weeks have been really, really busy. Had a lot of craziness going on, but we did get up to the Upper Peninsula a month or two ago. I think it was in August. Yeah. So that was the real highlight so far of this summer. We got to spend 4 nights, I think, up there, camping, hiking, exploring, and it was phenomenal.
But like camping and hiking, that's kind of your thing, right? Because I remember even when I was an undergrad, for those of you who don't necessarily know James and I's history, he and I were really good friends, even from when we were both in undergrad together. And even back then, I remember him talking about going out hiking and backpacking and things like that. So it must have been nice, to get your kids and your wife and go somewhere that I believe was a new place for all of you.
Yeah, we've never been up there. It is awesome. So my kids now are 3, 5, and 7. And it's a really cool and different experience to get to watch them fall in love with the outdoors. But yes, this has been my thing for a long time now.
Tell me before we get into talking more about like how it's been your thing for a long time, just real quick while we're still talking about your kids, how does it feel to see them kind of having similar experiences to maybe what you had when you were young, when you first started getting into nature and stuff like that? It must be cool, right? To see your own kids as almost like a reflection of yourself, discovering stuff for the first time. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the cool thing about parenting in general, is just being able to watch them process what you process. And in my case, especially, I feel like they have had a much healthier childhood overall. So to get to expose them to great things at a younger age is really, really fun, really cool. All of my kids are really They love being outside. They keep asking for when we're going camping again. They just are eating up the whole experience. So yeah, it's just really, really fun to see that part that's so important and valuable to yourself, which is different for each parent, but to see your child grab hold of it for themselves and take ownership because they like it, not just because you like it, is a really, really gratifying thing. So I love it.
So I kind of like assumed, but I mean, I may be wrong. Was that your experience as well? Like, I know you mentioned your oldest is 7. So were you around that age also when you first started enjoying doing stuff outdoors, or was that a later development for you?
So it came in stages. So my early childhood, I I hated the outdoors. Actually, I was afraid of it. I was really I had a lot of anxiety as a small child for some reason, and we lived in the middle of nowhere in rural Maine, and we didn't really do any camping or anything like that. And so it just wasn't something that I had been exposed to early in life, and I didn't like it. I didn't want to be outside. I always wanted to be indoors. Changed when we moved to central Maine. We were up on the Canada border before that. We moved to central Maine and we got a dog. And so I fell in love with this dog, and she got outside. So she got me outside. So I started realizing, oh, this is so much fun. Like, this is a playground. I I lived in a really isolated area. So we were outside of a town of 1,200 people, but we were probably 15 minutes, 20 minutes from the town. And on this backcountry road, and my parents were renting a farmhouse that had 90 acres, had 2 mountains, 3 streams, a waterfall, and woods and fields, and nobody around when I initially got there. So I started learning. First of all, I didn't have anyone to hang out with. I didn't know anybody. We were homeschooled. So I was really isolated. And I started realizing my imagination could just come alive and I could do and be whatever when I was outside. So I started just exploring all day as much as I could. The second stage of it was when my mom took us on a crazy road trip around the United States, 6 months. We went around the United States, 5 kids and my mom in a minivan, all the way around the US, camping most of the time. And so we went everywhere from Niagara Falls to Redwoods, to the Everglades, I mean, we were at Mount Rushmore. Obviously, geographically, that didn't make sense, but that's what we did.
So how
You
old
know,
were you when all this happened
so I was 7 when that happened.
for the road
Uh,
trip?
yes, I think I turned 7 on the road trip. I turned 7 in Texas.
Okay.
So that made a huge imprint on my mind. The idea of sort of being a free spirit and exploring and thinking of the world as just this awesome place waiting to be discovered. And so that really set the tone for me, those 2 events. And then a little bit later, when I was probably like 12, 13, I got into the Boy Scouts, and we would just go camping and hiking and backpacking. And I learned a lot of skills there. And that really started me being, just in love with being outside all the time. And so my initial degree, I don't know if you remember this, was International Rescue and Relief, because I wanted to do search and rescue. I wanted to just be outside and save people and do all this epic stuff. So yeah, so it came with pretty early exposures, and then also as a form of escape between isolation and kind of some family drama type stuff. I wanted to be outside because it was stable and quiet and different. And I think that's what really got me excited about it.
And I think you make a good point in saying that nature can provide both an escape to those who are looking for it, as well as just an enhancement to those whose lives are already like more or less fine. Like, just because you have a good life and you have a happy family and like a friend group, like that doesn't mean that the outdoors has nothing to offer you. So I think it's good that you're emphasizing like not only did it provide you with like comfort in like the hard times, but also even in good times, nature seemingly made everything like better. So as you talk about these things, I'm sure that there have been memorable moments that have happened in the recent years as well. Cause I know you mentioned road trip, but that was back when you were 7. Like if someone asked you now, if you could go back in time and like relive one of your experiences outdoors, and who knows, maybe it would be the road trip, but if someone asked you like, hey, I have a time machine right here, it'll take you back, and you had to pick one of your like best moments from being outdoors, which would you pick?
Good question. There's probably 2 or 3 that really go around the top. But I think the one I would pick, if I could relive one, was rock climbing in Utah. We went to do what is called a multi-pitch. So a multi-pitch essentially is, it's so tall, the wall that you're climbing is so tall that the length of the rope is not long enough. So you have to climb the length of the rope, get up to a landing spot, reset, climb the length of the rope again for each pitch. So you're doing separate climbs, but up the same wall. And so this was my first real exposure to rock climbing. And we went out to a place near Moab called Castle Rock. I think it's called Castle Rock. It's right by Daystar Academy for your conservative Adventist viewers. And
Oh yes, my numerous conservative Adventist
there's
viewers.
I know there's a lot of them out there. Hello, happy Ellen White to you.
Yes.
But anyway, so it was out there, and I was doing my survival summer for International Rescue and Relief, and we did a 5-pitch climb.
And how long was the rope?
Man, I don't remember now.
That was my roundabout way of saying how far did you climb?
It was about 50 feet per climb. I don't know how long the rope itself was, but it was about 250 feet altogether. But
Okay.
what we were doing was we were climbing up. So like we hiked up to say here, right? But there's all the rest of this on the front side. And so we actually climbed the rest of the back of the face. And then you went above your last anchor to the very top of this rock, which was only wide enough for one person to stand on at one time. And you look out over the top, and it was 1,000 feet vertical. It was incredible. I mean, just nothing like it ever before. Powerful, terrifying, ridiculous, and yet so gratifying to know that I did this. I made it all the way up this thing. And the timing happened so perfectly. So we were taking turns going up that last one, and then coming back down to the second pitch. And when I got up there, it happened to be right at sunset.
Oh, wow.
So I got up to this epic place, 250 feet climbing, 1,000 foot vertical straight down, sun is setting. And I mean, just the feeling of accomplishment and euphoria and being in awe of nature, of God's creation. It was incredible. Then we got to rappel down the front of it. So we did a whole rappel all the way down to the cliff bottom, which was really cool.
Did you say that was your first experience with rock climbing?
It wasn't my first experience with rock climbing. It was my first experience with multi-pitch. And I think it was the same or the second weekend that I'd ever been on real rock. You know, I started on this little sort of practice gym because we were in Nebraska, and there's not a lot of rocks there. So, yeah, this was my second weekend, I think, that I'd ever actually climbed on real rock. And that was what hooked me. It was awesome.
That must have been wild. What were some of the other great times you would want to go back to? I know you mentioned there was more than one.
Yeah. So there have been several times where I've section hiked the Appalachian Trail, and usually I do that by myself. One time I did a 3-night section hike, just me and my puppy, and we happened to be like our paths were crossing because we're all heading north at the same time with about 3 other people, 3 other groups. So a newlywed couple, a single older man, and then a younger single man who's going to go straight through the whole Appalachian Trail, and then me as a weekend hiker. And so we kind of see each other during the day at various times, but we all hike at different speeds. But every night we'd all end up at the same shelter again. And so we would have these moments of total solitude and just really being alone in our thoughts. And then we'd get to camp, and these people who would never interact outside of here. We had nothing in common. One was a highly placed college professor. The other two were very like upper class. I think he was about to be a doctor. Just very, very different style of life. And then the young man, he was like a big time country boy from Oregon who was kind of very introverted, and I think he dropped out of school and stuff. And then there's me, who's a pastor. I think I was a chaplain at the time. And none of these people were religious people at all. And yet the conversations and the sharing, the connection we had was so great. And that's one of the things I really love about being out in nature is, for me, it takes my mask off. And I feel like it takes other people's masks off as well. You don't have anything to prove, really. You don't have all of your comfort zone around you. And so it's just literally you and reality. To summarize, whatever, I don't know where it cut out, but the point was, it really was to me a microcosm of life, of taking away all of the things that don't matter in life and just leaving the core of people, of nature, of basic human needs, and of, trying to decide what really matters. And that's what I love about it. So every time I go out, I'm actually much more outgoing when I'm outside, when I'm hiking or doing something like that. I'm much more comfortable than I am in indoor or very rigid settings and those sorts of things.
Okay. So how would you recommend that someone who's never experienced this, like, get into it? Because you've made it sound very appealing and very like beneficial, whether you're already like sad and down, it maybe can cheer you up, or if your life is already really good, it can add to it. How have you helped people get into this in the past? Because if it is as great as you say, I'm sure that we could all benefit from getting outdoors a little bit more often. So how have you found is best to like get people into this sort of thing?
Well, I think there's a couple different things. Number one is find something that you actually like. So just because I like to rock climb does not mean everyone's going to love rock climbing. But other people are really into, other outdoor activities that I personally don't care for as much. I like to do usually more, I guess you could say, more extreme things usually.
Okay.
So like I love whitewater rafting, I love rock climbing, I love long distance backpacking, but that's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. So don't feel like one size has to fit all. I think just being outside is beneficial no matter what. But on the other side, keep an open mind. You know what I mean? Don't assume you're not going to like something, and don't go into something saying, I won't like this, I'm just going to get through it. Try everything. But on the other hand, if you're going to try something, especially the more extreme it is, the more you need somebody who's very experienced to do it. Don't just hop into whitewater rafting or even canoeing on, a calm surface. If you don't know how to properly canoe, number one, you're going to be miserable. Number two, you could get stuck somewhere, or you could tip the canoe and not know how to get back in. Nature is nature, and it really doesn't care about how good of a person you are, or how nice and how loving you are,
Yeah,
how
like
well intentioned you
whether
are.
or not you deserve what's about to happen to you.
It's just going to happen. And so you have to go with people who know what they're doing, whatever it is that you're going to try and do. Now, I think just getting outside and going for a walk every day is awesome. And I try to do that no matter what. If I can't go anywhere else, I'm going to go outside and just do something. I'll walk to school, or if I could, I would walk to work. Mine's a little too far. Or biking somewhere, just something really basic is worthwhile. But stuff like rock climbing, if you do that with people who don't know what they're doing, or you try to do it by yourself, you can die. I mean,
Yeah.
that's not
Yeah.
even an exaggeration. You literally can. I used to work at a rock climbing gym, and we would have people come in who said they knew how to belay, they knew how to do these things. And so I would have to test them. And it was shocking sometimes how much they did not know and how they thought
So
they could
were
just
these
get.
people who were like intentionally lying, or they just didn't
Oh yeah.
realize?
Yeah, no, there would be people who would say like, okay, I want to belay you. Belaying means like you're the one catching them if they fall and so on. And so you see this a lot with like husbands and wives or boyfriends and girlfriends. Usually it was the boyfriend who had some experience in rock climbing, but he wanted them to belay each other. He wanted to climb too. So he would stand outside right before we came in, and he'd show her how to tie a figure eight, which is the very basic knot you have to do, and show her, okay, this is what you do with your belay device. And then they'd walk in, right? And so he thinks, cool, like I've got enough, I can climb, she'll be able to pass this test. Well, first of all, I can see right through that within like 2 seconds. And if I sense that, like when I'm testing both of them, if I sense one is off, I'm gonna go to that person and ask them first, okay, can you tie in real quick? And if I ask somebody to tie in and they don't know what that means, that tells me something already, right?
Yeah.
Or if I ask them just real basic questions about their belay device, and if they don't know how to answer it, okay, cool, like you failed. And they would be like,
Why
usually
do you
the
say that with
guy,
such like glee on your face? Okay, cool, you failed. Like,
well, when you get
that's
to a certain
bad.
point, no, it was great. For me, I enjoyed failing people who needed to fail because it was literally saving their life.
Fair
And
enough.
that was the thing that people didn't get sometimes, is that you think you know what you're doing, but if you don't know what you're doing, you are going to hurt somebody, and it's probably going to be you or the person that you love, that you brought into this gym. And that is not okay. Like, it's just not okay. So a lot of people think stuff like rock climbing or whitewater rafting, because it's become mainstream, it's become safe. And the first thing we'd always tell them is this is inherently a non-safe sport. You can minimize the risk,
Yeah.
right? And if you know what you're doing, you can. I mean, I've never had a major injury yet in rock climbing, but I know plenty of people who have. And I know friends who've died doing this. So like it's no joke. So when people have watched a couple YouTube videos, or they went rock climbing once and now they think they can lead climb, I take a lot of joy in failing them, because I'm saving them from themselves, from their own silliness and ignorance, because
Fair
it has
enough.
to happen.
And it's funny because you're talking about like how with rock climbing these things can happen, and you also mentioned how like it doesn't even have to be something advanced like rock climbing or whitewater rafting. It can still be something basic and simple. And the point is that like when you go out into nature, if you're not careful, stuff can go wrong. And immediately what I thought of was something that happened with me. And I may have told you this story, I'm not sure. But when Esther and I, we were on spring break one time, and it was the spring break that I proposed to her. So we're like in Thailand, and it's beautiful, and the beaches are like really nice, and the water is perfect. So obviously, like, you go on vacation and you're having like a good time, and you start feeling yourself a little bit, and you're like, yeah, like I'm here, like this is freaking awesome, and you're feeling good, right? You're riding high. So my wife, I mean, not my wife at the time, my girlfriend at the time, she and I are looking around like this little like outcropping of rocks, and we see just around there's this like perfect little bay, like a little half moon bay, like something you'd see from a travel brochure. And we were like, oh, that looks so cool. It's like hidden from the main beach, and we're already over here. And this is nice, but how much nicer would it be if we swam over there? I can hardly swim at all. Like, I am not a good swimmer in the slightest. And when my girlfriend says, wouldn't it be cool if the two of us swam over there? It would just be us over there. It's like our own private little beach. I didn't say, oh, I should stop swim. I can't, because did the call just freeze again? I should have just been honest and said, hey, I don't know if I can swim that far, because it's the ocean, like it's one thing to swim in a pool, and if you get tired, just go to the side. But it's like you're saying, nature is not so kind. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm not that great at swimming, but my girlfriend wants to swim over. Like, let's just go. It'll be fine. So we start swimming, And first of all, like, I don't know what it is about the ocean, and I'm sure you've noticed this. Like, when something looks close in the water, and then you get in the water and you start swimming, it's like 10 times further away. So I thought, oh, we'll just be swimming for a couple minutes and we'll go around the thing and it'll be fine. And but I thought like 5 minutes would be as the max would be in the water. But at 5 minutes, we're still going around the rock. I was like, this rock is enormous. What happened? So we get like 2/3 of the way there, and I'm just like, I have nothing left. Like, I'm not gonna make it. So I literally had to tell Esther, I was like, Esther, can we stop for a moment? And she was like, a moment? Stop for, we're in the middle of the, what do you mean stop for a moment? It's like,
So how far was this actually? Do you have any idea?
uh, if I had to guess, maybe like a little over a quarter of a mile one way. It might have been about a quarter of a mile, maybe a little less. The truth is that like I am a bad. It might have been that I underestimated how far it was, or I overestimated my capabilities, or a little bit of both. So I'm not sure if it was really the distance that caused the problem, is what I'm saying. The point is that Esther was like, "What do you mean stop and take a break? Like we're in the middle of the ocean. Like what are you gonna do? Sink to the bottom and like rest? You can't. There's no." So she realized what was happening. She was like, "Wait a second. You said you could swim this," and I was like, "Yeah, but I can't." So it was like, so she got really mad at me, and we like stopped on a little reef, and we're like perched there. She's like, "Why would you lie to me? What's wrong? There's no point in going over here if you're gonna mess yourself." So I had to sit instead of like going to my private beach with my girlfriend. I sat on the reef and cut my foot and got scolded by my girlfriend instead. So that was my
It's good
reward.
preparation for marriage. You overestimating your ability, and then your spouse being frustrated by your overestimation of your ability, and personal pain being involved.
You
That's
say that was strangely specific. You say that like this has happened to you
I'm just
before.
saying it's a classic. It's a classic experience. I'm not saying I experienced that. Just that
Have
it's
you experienced that though?
yes, all the time.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Has that
100%.
happened? Has some, I mean, obviously, like, I think you're probably much more capable than me, but has anything like that happened where you like tried to show Kyra something and you were like, oh yeah, I got this. And then like it didn't work or anything like that with going outdoors and stuff?
I can't think of anything with Kyra specifically. I feel like we've always had pretty decent experiences, but there have been times, that's another reason why you need to go with somebody who is better than you when you're starting something, because there have certainly been times where I have bitten off more than I could chew. Um, one time I was, this is before I knew what it was, but I was free soloing a very short cliff. But free soloing means there's no ropes attached at all. And I got about 2/3 of the way up. And it was probably about a 35, 40-foot cliff. And it seemed like pretty easy and whatever. And I got about 25 feet up or whatever. And um, there was just like nowhere to go. But you learn when you're climbing that climbing up is a lot easier than climbing down. And climbing down climbing is where a lot of people get injured. And so it's the same thing with bouldering. Bouldering is where you're just climbing like one big boulder instead of trying to go straight up a wall. And you can get all the way up to the lip of the boulder sometime, but then you still have to get down. And that's a messed up thing. So it was a very sketchy situation. And I thought I was going to die, and somehow made it to the edge and pulled myself over and didn't realize. And there were like heavy, sharp rocks at the bottom. So it would have been pretty messy if I not made it.
That's one of
Um,
those stories that you like kind of downplay it when you
yeah,
tell your wife,
yeah,
like,
exactly.
how was your day? Oh, it was pretty good. Had a
That's fine.
kind of sketchy climb, but it worked out.
No big
And you
deal.
don't mention how you were like shedding tears of
Right.
like regret for how you've lived your life. You're like imagining that this is the end or whatever.
Yeah, another time I had to do swiftwater rescue training for my IRR degree that I never got. But the swiftwater rescue training that I did that day was called eddy hopping. So an eddy is, say you have a big rock in the middle of the river. As the river flows around it, it curls around the backside. And so if you have a fast moving river and it curls in, this is the best place for you to get a rest. So you want to swim past it and catch the eddy. But it takes a lot of timing, and if it's a very fast moving river, it's very challenging to hit just right, especially when you're just getting started. So we had on that day we had to hit 4 out of 5 eddies in a row, just go from one to one to one to one, and I missed the very first one, and I'm going past the second one, and I barely make it to the second one. I hit all of the rest of them, so I hit all 4, and now I need to get to the edge. But I was so exhausted by that time. We were in Colorado. I think we were at like 7,000, 7,500 feet. And I've been in Nebraska before this. So the altitude was really killing me. The amount of swimming I had to do in swift water was killing me. So my stamina was gone. And they had like a downriver backup. So if you didn't get to the river edge, they were supposed to rescue you. I was so tired, I floated past the downriver backup, and I really thought I was just gonna go to New Mexico or something.
Okay, bye.
Yeah, bye. And like they told us, hold your fist up if you really need help, and we'll help you. And so I did, and they just watched me go by, and I was like, "What the heck?" And
That's so bad.
I'm still bitter about that to this day because they have a throw bag. It's like a rope attached to a weight, so you toss it out and you can grab the rope. I was supposed to do that. Didn't happen. And about 25, 30 feet past the downriver backup, I grabbed like some reeds on the edge of the river bend and like threw myself to the corner or the edge of the river and thought I died. So
the irony of the Swiftwater Rescue Training Team not rescuing you out of the swift water.
Yep.
That's so bad.
Yep. But those are just 2 of many examples of me overestimating my abilities. And it happens all the time. In fact, the day we did the multi-pitch, the beauty was that it was at sunset.
And then it was the middle of the night. And
the problem was then it was sunset, right? So we went all the way down, and by the time we got to the bottom of the cliff, we still had to get back to our car, and it was pitch black in the desert. So there's no path really. You can't see it. And there was actually a gully in between the parking lot and where we were, but you don't notice it during the daytime, but at night it was impassable. So we lost our trail and we headed back, and we could shine our light and see about 100 yards away. We could see the cars, just the headlights just flashing and reflecting off our flashlight. We couldn't get there. It took us probably 2 or 3 hours, what should have been a 20-minute walk, to figure out how to go around and how to actually get to our vehicle.
See, I'm very thankful that you shared this, because this is like an arrow in my quiver that I can use in like debate with the person I most frequently debate, which is my wife. Anyone who knows me will know that. We had a situation, it was in a desert, it was at night, and I was sharing your sentiments of, hey, nighttime in the desert is not something you play around with, because it's really easy to get turned around and you can't freaking see anything. So like you can be looking with the light and be like, this looks familiar, and be going like the complete wrong direction, and you won't notice for a while.
Yeah.
So like it was in Joshua Tree National Park. We were going to go and do a photo shoot for, I think it was our first wedding anniversary. And it was just going to be something fun. We're going to get dressed up and go to a cool location, get a professional or a photographer to take some pictures. But there was miscommunication. He thought that, I'll tell them where to meet me and then I'll drive into the park. The problem is there's no signal. So he sent a message, hey, meet me here, I'm going in. And then he went in, and the title of the place that he said, that was like a name that people called it by, but we didn't know that. It wasn't a name that was on a sign. So we were driving through the park looking for this name on any of the signs, and we drove through the entire park, never saw it. And then we're like, well, let's call the guy and ask him. He's in the park. So we couldn't get a hold of him. So we drove back and forth through Joshua Tree National Park like 3 times. Never found this dude. The sun's going down. The dude, like, we were just like, for all we know, this guy left because it's now been like 2 hours. So we were upset, and I was like, you know what? Let's just like get our food that we brought with us, and let's just go find like a cool rock to sit on and like have dinner and watch the sunset. It'll be really cool. And it was very cool. It was obviously not what we had planned, but it was still really awesome. And then Esther said, I want to stay out and watch the stars come out. And I was immediately torn because I like to fancy myself as being like, oh, I'm the protector. Yes, I will protect you. Obviously, I'm not like the biggest, strongest guy, but you know how it is. You want to protect your girl, right? So I was like, I don't know if we should do that. And she was like, why not? And I was like, because it's not safe. And Esther looked at me and she was like, we're in a national park. What's going to happen? You think like someone's going to like, what are you suggesting? And I was like, so I was trying to explain the danger, but all that was coming out was, it'll be dark.
It's dark.
And she was like, yeah, it's nighttime. It's going to be dark. What? And like, I was having trouble articulating my point, which was that you don't understand. Like, if we go the wrong way, we'll be walking all night and we'll never find the car.
Yeah.
And in the end, I was able to convince her, like, okay, some of the stars came out, time to go. And we left. I mean, obviously, like, the car wasn't that far. It wasn't like a 20-minute walk. It was more like a 2-3 minute walk. But still, I was like, I'm not taking chances. We already had a bad day. I don't want the bad day to get worse with, now we got lost in the desert and couldn't find the car.
The thing is, with search and rescue, you know, I was being trained in that, and your story is exactly what 90% of search and rescue is in national parks. It happens all the time. People, they wander off the trail, or it gets dark. They get disoriented. People don't realize how easy and how quick it is to get disoriented. They don't have water. They don't have, you know, some way of making fire. And so they overestimate their ability to get back or to be able to figure out where they are. It's really easy to get disoriented pretty much anywhere that you're not familiar with. And people have to get rescued all the time. And people end up getting in, you know, huge situations that way all the time. Now, if it's 2 or 3 minutes away from your car, theoretically, you
like,
will be okay. But overestimating your ability is a huge part of it. And I think that's actually one of the reasons why I like being outside in these situations so much. Is it teaches me so many life lessons. And one of them is humility. That a huge part of my problem usually is pride, thinking I know more than I do, thinking I am more prepared than I am, thinking I am more okay than I am. And nature just smacks you in the face pretty quickly and reminds you that that's not true.
so what are some of the other lessons you've learned then? Because I know you've mentioned already a couple of times that there's like a spiritual benefit. You said that it like has helped you with things like that. And then you mentioned humility, which obviously can be applied in a spiritual context as well. I don't know if you were meaning lessons like spiritual or otherwise, but what are some other ones that you would say you've learned from nature?
Yeah, actually, I think I get more lessons. Like God gives me more lessons outside than anywhere else. And one
Why do you
thing
think
is,
that is, by the way? Just
it
no
could just be,
reason?
it could just be me. It could just be this is where I feel the most open to it. But I also think that there is something to be said for everybody. Like I said before, it's sort of, it takes you away from your comfort zone. It takes you away from all familiarity, from the things that keep you from hearing God. If you have no cell phone service, first of all, right? You don't have a TV out there. You don't have electricity, and you only have the food that you carry with you if you're going on, say, a backpacking trip. So now it literally is you alone with your thoughts or with the people around you, and you can't hide behind all of these other things and keep the noise going. The noise disappears. That's changed now with like iPads and stuff like that, iPods. I mean, people can keep it going if they want to, but I never do that personally. I always kind of keep my own. Are you making fun of me because I said iPods?
You do know, just for the record, that because you were talking, no one could see me. So if you hadn't
Oh,
said
doing it
something,
that way? Well,
no
you were
one would
making
have
fun of me.
known.
Let the
But
record be
because
shown
you,
that when I said iPods, Jerome smirked because I'm an old man and forgot that iPods don't even exist anymore.
I wasn't going to say anything.
No, whatever. I don't want to talk about it anymore. You know what?
We weren't going to talk about it at all. You're the one who brought it up.
Done. No, whatever.
Okay.
So, no, to bring it back, the point is, that's why I think I hear more from God, is because I'm intentionally going out there to be uncomfortable in a certain way. I found that reading the Bible makes so much more sense outside for me, especially the Psalms. And when I'm out there and when I'm reading the Bible, it's incredible how much outdoor imagery is being used. I'm really convinced that the Bible wasn't intended for people who are spending their time outside. Sometimes I think that's why we feel like it's irrelevant to us in the 21st century, is because we're inside in our insular cocoons all the time. And we're missing out on relating to what's being said a lot of times. So lessons, one big lesson that I've always carried with me was with the Appalachian Trail. And, the Appalachian Trail, it's over 2,000 miles from Georgia to Maine. And it's my goal to hike the whole thing someday. So I've hiked the first 120 miles of it. I've hiked other sections too, but the first 120 I've hiked. And it's essentially just a trail that goes up and down every annoying mountain between Georgia and Maine, and half the time doesn't even give you a good view. So you're just dying to get up this hill, get up to the top, and there's just trees everywhere. And it's like, well, that was cool. Then you go back down the other side, and then you do it all over again. So you really have to kind of be a glutton for punishment to do it. And then every once in a while, there are these views, and the views are incredible. And so, one good analogy is the mountaintop experience that we've all heard, right? Like, appreciate those mountaintop experiences that you've achieved, you've made it, whatever. Another part of that is every time you reach a mountaintop experience, you're going to go down the other side. And so when you reach this pinnacle in your life, don't be surprised that you start feeling worse afterwards. After you've achieved, after things have gone well in your life, you're going to go downhill for a while. And that's a normal part of the growth process, of the life process. Elijah's a great example of this. After he had done this amazing literal mountaintop experience where fire had come down from heaven and licked up all the water and everything on this altar, and he had proven who was the true God in front of like 450 prophets of Baal, and this incredibly powerful moment where he is so self-assured and he is vindicated. The very next thing he does is run away. And he runs, and he runs, and he runs, and he runs. And God keeps saying, what are you doing here? And he's like, I'm totally alone. And then he falls asleep, right? And then God's like, okay, you need some food, you need a rest, whatever. We'll talk about this later. But the point being that at your highest point, you're probably going to fall from that. You're not going to keep that high forever, right? And that's okay. There will be another mountain to conquer. The one that's really stayed with me a lot was there are these, if you're hiking between two peaks, you'll go down a little bit no matter what. And when you go down, you hit this little valley, and sometimes they're not all the way down. They're about halfway in between, and they're totally empty usually, and it's just this flat Let's say that again. This flat space in between the two mountains. And that's where I would stop and I would eat my lunch, and I get myself mentally prepared for the next hike, because those uphills are brutal and they go on sometimes for miles and miles of just going up, and it's exhausting, and you're carrying a backpack and you're like, why did I want to do this? I have no idea why I'm out here. I hate my life. I hate myself, right? And then you get to the mountaintop experience. What I learned from that was to appreciate those in-between moments, to appreciate that valley. That's the rest stop. So in other words, every time I went up and down a mountain, I've conquered that mountain. That mountain, I walked up it and I walked down it. That's my mountain now, right? I've done it. Now there's another mountain in front of me. But there's these little in-between gaps. That's what I call it. Enjoy the gaps or appreciate the gaps. That gap is that moment in time where you can rest before you have your next big battle. And I believe God gives us those gaps in our lives too. So you have some huge mountain that you have to climb. Some part of your character has to be perfected. Some area in your life needs to be worked on, or some ministry needs to be accomplished that's very challenging to you. Whatever it is, we're all going up these mountains, or we made it to the top and now we're on our way back down. But before you hit the next mountain, there's that gap. And I've seen them so many times in my life where, for just a day or two or a couple weeks or something, God gives just this little peaceful moment where, actually, I think you're kind of in a gap right now. And so much of the time we don't take advantage of the gaps, but those gaps are placed there because God says you need some rest, you need some nourishment, you need some mental preparation, because the next thing I have for you is going to be bigger than the last one, or equally exhausting because you just did that one. So that lesson for me is really important, to really take advantage and appreciate the gaps.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense that you would talk about those things as being like analogies for the real world. And I think you hit the nail on the head in saying that I myself am in one of those moments, because I'll be honest with you, it's been hard coming down from the high of finishing the last 4 years. Before I was thinking of it as 2 years working and then like 2 years in school and like kind of separating them. But as I look back on it now, it really seems like those 2 and 2, like it should really just be one cohesive 4-year thing when I look back on it in my life, because I was learning what I was doing the whole time. Like there was never a moment in the last 4 years where I was like, I am just practicing what I know. It was like, no, I literally have no idea what I'm doing, like at all. So I had 2 years of learning in the field, and then I had 2 years of learning in school. And it culminated in getting my degree and having all of these awesome experiences with people. But now I graduated, and the last 2 months of I did take a little bit of time just to relax. And then I started like looking for jobs and stuff. And it's been hard, man. Like there's definitely been some depression that's set in. And I remember at one point I was feeling it. And I've had this type of depression before. It's very, very mild in comparison to like what some people go through, but it's still there. And we've talked about it before. I've been through it before, but this is the first time that it's happened while I've been with Esther. So I was very taken aback because I was like, what do I have to be depressed about? Like I'm with my wife. We live together. She's in my bed every morning when I wake up, and we go to bed every night. She's there. She comes home to me every day. We have our own place. We have our little dog. Like, this is great. So why am I feeling the same way that I felt when I would be like depressed from work in Dallas or depressed from school in Michigan? Like, how can this be? But I think you're right in that it's kind of like I'm comparing what I'm doing and where I am to the mountaintop. And it's like, what am I doing? I'm wasting my time. Like, this is just me spinning my wheels. I'm not going anywhere. But instead of looking at it that way, maybe I should look at it as I'm in one of those in between moments. Which, what was the technical term?
The gap.
I have to use that the in between gap thing.
Actually, now I'm remembering, the way I would always say it and remind myself is mind the gap, because that's what you say about other things. So in other words, mind the gap is my reminder. Hey, you're in a gap right now. Soak it up, because you won't get this time again.
Yeah, I think that's the attitude that I need to take, because it's very easy for me to look at people who are doing so much more than me and who are being successful in their endeavors and going and doing these big, amazing things. And I look at myself and I'm like, I can't even get like a part-time job. And I mean, obviously, like, there's nothing wrong with being in a time like this where God says, you have done a lot. Now I need you to do a little bit less for a while. And I have something more for you. Just be patient and you will see. So I'm going to try and take that and apply that. I mean, it's hard. I'm sure you know how it is. Like, it's one thing to see the lesson and for God to be like, here you go, learn this. And it's another thing for you to actually like take it and then apply it in your own life.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why he gives me the lesson is because I'm so boneheaded that I never learn it. So he has to keep putting it, in front of me over and over and over again. Um, I think something that you said really, I think, just speaking as a fellow minister, someone who's committed to full-time ministry in some form or fashion, I really think that many of us who are in that position are really uncomfortable with not doing something for God. And I think we sometimes wrap a lot of our value up into what we are or are not accomplishing on behalf of God. And that actually removes us from having a grace-oriented relationship with him.
What do you mean when you say that? Just for clarification's sake, because how does the way I feel about whether or not I'm doing something affect the way that I view my relationship with, like, it seems as if the two things that you've just connected, they don't seem connected.
So there's an internal and an external motivator that we can have when it comes to doing things for God. You've heard this basically, like I either do things in order to be saved or I do things because I'm saved, right? Well, we're educated theologically well enough to know we don't do anything in order to be saved. That's how we intellectualize it. But the reality is, in my experience at least, there are many times when I don't feel comfortable unless I think I'm doing enough for God. If I'm not involved in enough ministry, if I'm not out there doing something, whatever that thing is, then I'm not really okay in my relationship with God. But that really, at least in my mind, is a works mentality. It's God will only be pleased with me, or I can only really feel fulfilled in my relationship with him if I am doing something actively on his behalf. In other words, I need to feel needed by God. I want to be wanted by him. And the only way to do that is to have some form of work to do. And so to sit there and to stew in it and to have nothing that I'm doing, or it feels like I'm doing nothing, it's hard to be okay with that. That tells me that I'm not necessarily as secure in my own just relationship with him. That if I did nothing else on his behalf, would he still love me? Would he still actually want me in his kingdom? Would he still want to connect with me on a daily basis? And the answer is yes, but the feeling for me oftentimes is no if I'm not doing enough. And I think many of us who are ministers are workaholics. And we feel like we have to put our ministry, whatever it looks like, in front of our personal lives sometimes, or in front of even our families. That's a mistake that so many people have made, right? And I think it's not a grace-oriented relationship. But if you get to a certain point where every day you're like, God, I don't care if you make me a trash collector, if you make me at home. The question I have is, what do you want from me today? What do you have for me, right? Like, I'm just so excited to be here with you, God. Like, this is so cool that I'm in this relationship. I can't believe that we're friends. What's up today? And if God really said, okay, today, I just want you to be in my presence. I don't want you to actually do anything. Would I be okay with that? And if he's told me that tomorrow and the next day for a couple weeks or whatever, would I still be okay with that? I think of Mary and Martha, which is a fascinating story, right? When you actually look at it. And Martha's doing everything right. She's action oriented, and she is ministering, and she's saying, I'm cleaning the house, I'm getting everything ready for the guests, and I'm not shirking my responsibilities. Please tell my sister to help me, because she's just sitting there listening to you. She can listen to you later. And it is shocking when you are in that story, if you put yourself in that story, at least for me, that Jesus rebukes Martha and says that Mary's got it right here. Like, sometimes you have just got to stop doing and start being when it comes to God. And when you do that, the actions will come later.
And I think I think it's cool that you would phrase it exactly like that, because that ties back into what you had been saying about going out and getting outside, because that's exactly it. When you go outside and you get away from what your normal day-to-day work is or whatever, that's the time where you stop doing stuff. It's like, look, I know you have things going on, I know you have deadlines and projects, whatever, but stop doing that. Just be here in this moment. If you're with people, then just be here with these people. If it's just you, then be here with your thoughts and with God. But stop doing stuff for a moment. Just be here.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the problem that I see, and you touched on it a little bit earlier, you said how nowadays all of us living in the 21st century with modern technology and in our own little bubbles, as it were, how are we supposed to get outside and have those experiences on a regular basis? Like, if you're like me, I live in an area where it's not a simple thing. Like, I can't just go to my backyard and like walk into like these open acres or like this forest or whatever. And of course, people who live out in the country, to them, like the countryside may be defined differently for them. Do you get what I'm saying? But the point I'm
Mhm.
trying to make is that for a lot of people, it's not so easy to just go outside and get in nature. So like, what are you supposed to do then? Like, oh, if it's so important to do this and it's so beneficial because it enables you to just be focused on God's presence and all that. Well, what am I supposed to do if I live in the middle of a city? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to do this thing that you've said is so great?
That is a very good question. I think it comes down a lot to your preconceived notions about what it means to get outside and get in nature. Um, for example, first of all, before I lived in Berrien, I lived in Atlanta, right? So I, I lived in the city, and um, it was claustrophobic sometimes because there was just so much. But I think if you get into a mindset of exploration, you will find that there are little gems of nature everywhere, including in the middle of the city. There are beautiful parks somewhere around you. There are little, little nature pathways right nearby. Even in my opinion, I'd love to just walk around different neighborhoods. I'll explore different neighborhoods. I could be in the middle of New York City, and I think I'd still be very happy as long as every once in a while I can get to real nature. Still being in the middle of New York City and being able to explore different neighborhoods all the time, just being outside of my comfort zone of where I normally am is helpful. Um, Even here in Berrien Springs, it's funny to me because people from big cities will come here and they say, "This is so country. This is so bumpkin-like. I can't handle how rural this is." In Kyra and I coming here, um, it feels like so many people, it's so populated because even the countryside has farms everywhere. I'm used to remote, like wilderness, and that's where I love to be. So my goal always is to be as far away from civilization as possible. But so I've had to sort of reorient that because in Michigan there's not that much. But at the same time, I found that if I take an attitude of exploration, of like just seeking them out, there's stuff everywhere. My friend keeps asking me, like, how did you find this place? How did you find that place? I'm just researching. I'm just looking and trying to figure out, okay, where are these pockets? There's little pockets of beauty everywhere. If you look for the beauty, there's a life lesson, right? If you look for the beauty, you will find it all around you. If you assume that beauty will look a certain way, then you might have a much harder time figuring out where it is, even if it's right next to you.
Fair enough. That's a very, how should I say, a very different take on the issue that I think someone like me, and I think a lot of us who maybe don't live in the most natural environments, can take to heart. Because you're right, it's not just about going and like walking out and going to like a national park. Like, that's not the only way you can experience this principle that you're talking about. It's about getting out of your comfort zone and finding places that allow you to experience those feelings, whether or not they're like the most beautiful natural environment is not really the point. It's about the principle of the matter.
Hmm.
So, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's fine. I agree with you. That's all I have to say.
That was all you were going to say.
Well,
You were
I
gonna
was
say.
going to say every big city has parks. Every big city has parks, and a lot of them are very nice parks. Especially now, these days, in the last 20, 30 years, has been very intentional. Every city with water, so every river city and every ocean city has beautiful areas dedicated to those places, pretty much. Anyone that I've ever been to does. So actually being in a big city can allow you to experience nature sometimes better than being in like farmland country. That's harder to find public spaces.
Yeah, you get
When
there everywhere you go, like you're hopping someone's fence to get there.
exactly, you have to make good friends with the right people.
Yeah.
So actually, the hardest place has ever been for me to find these places within southern Georgia, because it was very rural, but it was very much just cotton and peanuts. And so I was like, where do I go? But even there, as I looked for it, it was all around me. I just had to seek it out, be creative.
That makes sense. I think that it can be hard sometimes because you don't want to put the effort, and usually like you're saying like, oh, it's very beneficial, but like you have to put in the effort to experience the benefits I'm talking about. A lot of times that's where you lose people. I know I myself tend to give up on something if someone's like, oh, like there's this thing you should try and it's super beneficial, but it requires me to go like out of my way of what I normally do. That's usually the part where I start losing enthusiasm for whatever it is that's being mentioned.
Right. And I think at the same time, I can't, as much as I talk up nature, you have to be okay with being really uncomfortable. It's not always just a joyous experience. You will get sunburned, especially if you're as pale as I am. You will
I was
get
gonna say that was a problem very specific for you, and I'm sure many others. But of the two of us here, I've probably been
many,
sunburned
many
far less
others.
frequently than you.
Well, yeah, okay, fine, whatever. You will get tanned. Uh,
That's not
no,
a mythical thing. You say it like it's not. That's a thing. Yes,
I've
it
never been
happens.
tan. I don't believe in it. I don't think it's real.
I was
Okay,
not born this color. I tanned to this color.
whatever. So no, okay, if you don't get sunburned, at the very least, you will get too hot or too cold. You will get too thirsty or too hungry. You will get eaten by some fly. You will get, ticks are so annoying. Ticks are my least favorite thing, maybe in the whole planet, um, followed by mosquitoes and black flies. So that's actually, it's miserable and frustrating at times, but the payoff is worth it, which again is an analogy for life for me. So all of these things, I don't go out there just because I'm going to be comfortable. I go out there to be manageably uncomfortable. Obviously, I don't want to be miserable the whole time, but I do want to kind of push myself to do something that other people aren't really willing to do because they want to just stay comfortable. And a song lyric that I love says, "Comfort be the thing that'll make a king fall." And it's alluding to David, right? The problem with him was he was comfortable. He didn't fall until he decided to stay home and stop fighting battles. And he got comfortable, and then he started thinking he could have whatever he wanted. Then he had his huge lapse. I think sometimes in America, especially, we are too comfortable. And I don't want to be comfortable. And so for me, a way to do that is to be in a place that is different and to adapt and to find a way to be happy and be content, even if flies are buzzing around me. And a big part of that is preparation, right? You will be much happier in the outdoors if you prepare correctly. So if you have enough clothes, you won't be too cold. If you have the right type of clothes, you won't get too hot. If you bring sunscreen, which I never do, you will not risk sunburn or skin cancer. If you bring the correct bug spray, you're much less likely to be bothered by bugs. So like the more preparation you have, the better off you will be. But at the same time, you still have to risk the fact that this might just be an uncomfortable trip. And that's okay. There's still going to be a memory that comes out of it.
That sounds like the potential. And I know this is a very serious topic that we've just brought up, the idea of like being willing to get out of your comfort zone because it will be worth it in the end. But just in hearing you share, I sense the opportunity to like work in a funny story there. Has that happened to you? Like, have you had a moment where like you or maybe someone who was coming along with you was like woefully underprepared or anything like that? I feel like that has to have happened at least once.
Do you know this story? Because I think I have told you this story before. It involves a classmate of ours.
See, what I was trying to do was I was trying to like
I
set
know
you
you were.
up,
I
but
know,
you
but
weren't supposed to point it out. All right,
I'm just curious.
James
It
Lee,
was.
if you're watching this,
I wasn't gonna name
I'm
names.
gonna name names. Why
I
not?
can't believe you named names. You broke confidentiality like that.
So,
Hey, unknown person. I'm sorry that he broke confidentiality.
person X.
Person X, who broke my toe in Brazil in a very different story.
Yes.
Okay, so
We're not saying who it is, but it's the same person who broke your toe.
so this is another good life lesson. Don't overestimate other people's abilities.
Okay.
Don't assume people are as competent as you think they are.
Okay.
Remember, you're not as competent as you think you are. Usually they aren't either. No offense to the subject of the story.
The individual one, yes.
Yes. So, test subject one. So, I was at Southern, and we were on a break, or we were about to come up on a break. And so I was planning a trip to the Appalachian Trail to continue my segments. And so I was talking with somebody in the library, and he asked me what I was up to, and I said, "Hey, yeah, I'm going out to the Appalachian Trail. Do you want to join?" And he's like, "Yeah, I think I do. I think I'll do that."
Were you being serious? Like, or was that just one of those like
No, I was being serious
polite
because
things you threw out?
I love companionship. Again, it's a great place, in my opinion, to build stronger relationships.
So
And
in that
so
moment, you were being serious and
I was being
actually
genuine.
okay.
That wasn't my mistake. I really wanted him to come along, but the way that he presented it was as if he had been backpacking before. So
Okay.
I don't want to insult someone's intelligence, right? So I don't want to assume that you don't know how to go backpacking. If you say that you're going to come and you don't ask questions, I'm thinking you know what you're doing, right? That's
That does seem like a safe
right.
assumption. Yeah.
So he didn't ask any questions. He said, "Yeah, when is it? So and so. Okay, how long are we going? We'll do it overnight. It's gonna be, I don't know. I think it was 20 miles total or something like that. And we'll do this thing." And he said, "Yeah, cool, all right." And he decided to come along with me. So I didn't ask any questions. I didn't assume anything. I just went with it, right? I guess I did assume something. So So we get out and we get on the trail. We had a really good hike and great conversation. He was actually in better condition than me. So like by the end, I'm wheezing up the last rise and he's like walking by me, no problem, having a great old time. We get to camp and first of all, we saw a rattlesnake there right by the camp. And that was really cool.
That is cool.
People are terrified of snakes, but they're actually mostly our friends, and they keep the rat population down, who are our real enemies. And rattlesnakes, I read this is a side note. I read this awesome book about rattlesnakes one time, and I learned so much about them. And I went from being moderately hating them to being like a huge advocate for them because they've been almost wiped out in so many places in America. And they're actually not aggressive. I think only like 3 or 4 people have died in the last 100 years.
I grew up in a place where rattlesnakes were super, super common. And like the truth is that most snakes they'll just sit there and see you coming and they'll be like, well, I'm gonna bite you if you come over here. And then they bite you. Rattlesnakes literally have something designed to be like,
don't come here!
Please go away so I don't have to bite you. I don't want to bite you, so I'm shaking this rattle. Like,
right.
Like, come on. Like, how can you make them the bad guy? Like, they literally are like, I'm trying not to hurt you. Like, please
it's
don't.
just because they're scary. But the thing is, fun fact, we're going way too far down this trail, and we probably lost all
this
our
is
now.
This is now a snake documentary, by the way.
But this is important, okay? People need to know this. So the rattlesnake can decide how much venom to give you. So they have the 2 fangs, and they can give you 1 dose or 2 doses or no dose. They can actually decide just to bite you as a warning. Most people, when they get bit, they usually only get 1 dose. And there's actually documented examples of like a scientist who accidentally stepped on a rattlesnake and the rattlesnake just bumped his head against his leg to say, "Hey, you're on me." Didn't even bite him and just slither it away after.
How
They're
polite.
not aggressive. The ones who die are the ones who get 2 doses. The reason why they get a double dose is almost always because they are misperceived as their food. So they're trying to incapacitate. If they give you 1 dose, they're just giving you a warning, get away from me. And you'll survive that 9 times out of 10, unless you have a major reaction. If you get 2 doses, it's usually either a scientist who's in the wrong place trying to do too much, or maybe you reach in a wood pile and your hand coming in with their heat sensor looks enough like a rodent that they're trying to get the rodent.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why a person dies. But there's plenty of times where people actually get bit by a rattlesnake and don't get any venom at all, because the rattlesnake is just trying to say, get out of here, I feel trapped, I need you to go away from me. So, fun fact, rattlesnakes are your friends and they're dying. Stop killing them.
All right, I'll make sure to stop killing rattlesnakes when I see them. But
Yes.
as we were saying, the rattlesnake, I assume it didn't bite you guys, and it kind of
You
just.
can cut all that out. Yeah, no, we watched it for
Oh no,
like
I'm
half
leaving
an
that
hour.
in. That's golden right there. That's the snake content people are looking for, man. That's good stuff.
They are going to hate everything about this now. So no, we watched it for about half an hour and it never moved the entire time. So there's the shelter, the fire pit, and then this log, and it was curled up on the log. And we took some pictures and just kind of watched it. Never went anywhere. And so we were like, well, what do we do? So we decided, well, this is where we're sleeping, so we'll just assume it won't eat us. So anyway, we go over to the shelter, we get set up for the night. And this is when I realized we had some problems, right? And I'm trying to remember. So if this person watches, maybe he can correct exactly what he did and did not bring. But if I recall correctly, he did not bring a sleeping bag. And we were planning to sleep in open air shelter. We were just going to sleep in the shelter, bring a pad, bring a sleeping bag. And I told him, bring some bedding. I think he did bring one very light blanket. I don't know that he brought a pad at all. And then I don't think he had a long sleeve. And we're in the mountains and it gets cold.
Yeah.
And all I remember is that he did not have adequate bedding at all, and he was going to freeze. And if you sleep cold, you're going to be miserable. So, your whole trip will be colored by that. So I happened to have extra whatever, and I gave it to him, and I'm like, okay, that was weird, whatever. Then we go to, I don't think I realized it until the next morning. We get to eat breakfast, right? So we decided to bring our own food. I don't think we cooked together at all. Kind of did our own thing. And this man pulls out a half gallon of milk.
I was gonna say you clearly remember this part because you're already laughing as you're saying it. Like there's no
I was
uncertainty.
shocked.
You remember this?
He pulled out a literal half gallon of milk and a cereal box, and I think he had like a whole stack of like paper or plastic plates or whatever, bowls, and like I was flabbergasted because I realized the reason why he didn't have the proper bedding to keep him warm was because he told me he had taken his sleeping bag out so he could fit his milk in his backpack. And maybe you don't know, maybe someone else who makes it this far doesn't know. You don't carry any liquid besides water on a backpacking trip. It's too heavy. Liquid is so heavy. So you never carry any additional liquid. It's just in it. It goes all over the place. It can make your pack uneven. It can really, long term cause some problems with being unbalanced. And anyway, I've never seen someone bring that much milk on a trip. And milk does not keep. Milk is, and I'm sure it was soy milk because he's a very healthy individual. But
so he brought the healthy milk that he should not have brought any.
He opted for a half gallon of healthy milk instead of a sleeping bag. And that was the moment where I'm like, I can never assume.
So did you ask him? Did you be like, hey, you've done this before, right? Like, did you like not say anything?
At some point in this conversation, yes. I was like, so have you? And he's like, no, this is the first time I've ever backpacked. I was like, what? Why didn't you tell me this? I would have totally helped you with everything. And we had a good laugh. we went on our merry way and probably didn't. I don't think he's ever gone backpacking again since then. By the way, the
The
snake
snake.
disappeared. We still don't know what happened to the snake, but he never came to, hang out with us or anything. But whew, that was the beautiful moment where I realized that don't assume people know what you know when it comes to outdoor things, which is a good life lesson. Again,
Yeah.
I'm going to apply it to pastors, for example. Don't assume people have had the same experience or chance to know things in theology and things about Jesus that you have. Not everyone has had the same opportunity or time or whatever. So things that you think are obvious and no-brainers can be mind-boggling and mind-blowing to somebody who's trying to learn about God. And things that you might assume, like they know how to pray, or they know how to read the Bible for themselves, or how to have devotional life, how to do these basic things that keep our faith strong. A lot of people don't. So don't assume, because you might be shocked by the half gallon of milk sometime in the journey.
I mean, yeah, it's a bit of a, how do I say, like if you try to use that exact comparison, people are like, a half a gallon of milk? What? But it makes sense. Like sometimes you think that people will know something and they don't, or sometimes you think that people won't know something and they do. And generally when you assume, if you're wrong, there's no way around it. You're going to look silly.
Yeah.
Like something was like, it's not going to end well for you if you assume. And there are a lot of life lessons, man. You've given so much wisdom over the course of the last like hour and a half. It's just surprising to me that like, so because when we were talking about discussing nature, I was thinking, okay, well, he'll have like one or two points that he really wants to make and we'll just go from there. But you've had so many different things that you've brought out. It's cool because it's something that even I, in my like knowing beforehand what was going to be discussed, I'm surprised at how much there really is to learn.
Yeah. I mean, I literally could. You said you wanted to talk about something that, I was passionate about. This is something, I mean, being outside is such a broad topic anyway, but I mean, there's so much. I could talk about this forever and ever, which nobody wants except me, but I could because I love it. It's amazing. There's
So
so many
then
cool things.
let me pose you a bit of a challenge then. If you have to leave the viewers with like one final, like you know how like in the gospels, not the gospels, excuse me, like in the epistles, there'll be kind of like a thing at the end where it's like, okay, well, like if you're not going to get anything, just get this. Like there'll just be like that one final like truth that you leave them with. Like if you had to leave the viewers with like one final thing, like okay, maybe you skipped over the rattlesnake explanation, you skipped over the stories of like the parks and the cities, you skipped over like
Everything.
bouldering, like okay, whatever. But if you're gonna get anything, get this. Like what would be the one thing you would leave for the people?
All right, let me think about this. Um, I think maybe there's two things for why I'm so passionate about this and why I think it's so important. And both of them I'm going to connect to faith. So if you don't like faith, turn it off now. Um, the first is that we need to stop forcing everyone to connect to God in the exact same way, or trying to. We need to stop thinking that one size fits all with how people connect with God. I'm going to be brutally honest, and maybe I shouldn't be, but going to church many, many times doesn't do anything for my spiritual life. I go because I think it's important, and I go because I love the people I'm going to see. But if I had a choice for how I'm going to connect with God and really receive a message and have this real commune time with Him, it's not going to be at a church. It's going to be on a mountaintop, or it's going to be by a waterfall. It's going to be in the middle of a beautiful old growth forest. It's going to be there, with or without people. Doesn't mean I have to be alone. Doesn't mean I have to be with people. But that's where okay, God, this makes sense. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't go to church. It means that we should rethink how we do church and rethink what church is. Church is, according to the Bible, a community of believers. It's whenever people come together and say, we believe by faith in Jesus Christ that God loves us, God has forgiven us of our sins, etc., etc. And we're coming together to worship. Wherever that happens, that is church. And we've turned that into a cliche, but it is a reality. And I think that we need to be much more broad, even within our church building, and stop going through the motions of our worship service, because people who can't stand going through the motions are leaving our church. They're out, they're gone. And a lot of them are out on the trail. Some of my greatest postmodern super secular friends, it's almost a religious experience to be outside for them. And I don't think that they're running away from God in reality. They're running away from what they consider to be a very stuffy form of religion. And we're losing those people. We're losing people who think outside the box. And we're keeping only people who are okay with preserving status quo. And so I think that's why I go outside, because the people I meet are outside typically for the same reason, unless they're just trying to get their Instagram shots in and whatever, and that happens too. But they're out there because it's the place where they grow and where they commune and where they connect. And I think that's important for churches too. On that note, I think if nothing else, Ellen White tells us that, and many people have said the same thing, that nature is our second book. And so I think that means that if we really want to understand and know God on a deeper basis, we do need to spend some time outside. That doesn't look the same for every person, and that's great. But the Bible is excellent in revealing who Jesus is, revealing the plan of salvation, all these things that we can't know from being outdoors. So all my secular friends are missing this huge blessing because they don't really care about the Bible. They see it as irrelevant. But many, many Christians are missing the glory of God because they don't spend enough time outside seeing how glorious his creation really is and how incredible it truly is, how beautiful. After thousands and thousands of years of humans basically trashing it, it's still incredible. It still brings awe. And I know very few people who can go to this gorgeous vista, this overlook or whatever, and look out, especially at like a sunrise or a sunset, and not have their breath taken away, even if they're the least religious person in the world. It brings your mind to a higher plane, a higher level. And we need that, especially now we need that. There's, people talk about nature deficit disorder. The idea that a lot of ADHD kids really are just, they're dealing with a deficit of being outside, of learning the pace of what nature is, growing a garden or going on hikes and seeing everything. Being in front of a screen all the time is detrimental. It's necessary, and it has its benefits. I love being online, but we need to get outside.
Well, could I ask you one last favor then?
No.
Okay, well, that's going to conclude our video then. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. In all seriousness, could I ask you to pray for myself and those of us watching that we might be able to do as you have said?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, let's pray. All right. Dear Father, we want to thank you so much because you care about us in incredible ways. And you love us more than we love ourselves. You want to see good for us more than we desire good for ourselves. You want to save us more than we want to be saved most of the time. Help us to reprioritize our life all around. And Lord, I really believe that being in nature. In the first sanctuary was the Garden of Eden. The first church service was held outside in reality. Lord, help us to appreciate and worship you and learn from you and learn about the effects of sin even by being outside. Help each person to find the way that they can commune and connect with you by being outdoors, and give people some awesome memories, some awesome experiences by stepping out of their comfort zone and doing something out there. We ask this in Jesus' name.